Hello and welcome back, friends. I just moments ago, maybe an hour or two ago, finished my Moda Blockheads quilt. And so I wanted to pop down here, film a quick video for all of you so I could chat about it while everything is fresh in my mind. So as you can see, this is a big quilt. It finishes, it's right around 75 inches square, just a little bit bigger than 75 inches square. So it's a big one. As you can see, it doesn't even hardly hang up here very well. But I thought, well, that at least gives you a little bit of an idea of what this quilt looks like. I used both the 6-inch blocks and then the 12-inch blocks are all around the outside edge. So small blocks and then big blocks. And I used my Barnstar 7 pattern for the center of this quilt, which I think just adds a lot of scrappy funness to this design. This was a fun one to piece. There wasn't really a lot of piecing to do. Once I had this center done, then it was just a matter of adding the scrappy sashings in between all of the blocks here, a couple borders, and she's done. It was a fun finish. I'm glad it's done. I'm still all covered in thread. I don't know if you can see all of my thread, but we had a marathon sewing session this afternoon to get this done, and I'm glad to check it off my list. I'll be even more glad to send it off to my quilter and get this one completely wrapped up, but I think it turned out so pretty. For those of you following along, you know that I have been using Peachy Keen fabrics mixed together with Blueberry Delight fabrics. Blueberry Delight is by Sutton. Peachy Keen is my fabric line, and I thought those two collections just mixed together beautifully. I really thought it was pretty how Anne's line had more of the creamy white on whites, and then mine are a little more crispy white on whites. It's a warm white, and I like kind of the movement that gives throughout the quilt, having both of those shades of white in there. And then all of those pretty blues just look so nice with those peaches and corals. So I'm going to take this down so that I can show it to you in a little bit more detail, but I did want to make sure that you could at least see it to some degree hanging back here, even if it's maybe not the best because it is a big quilt, but you get the idea. We'll take it down and I will chat about some of the layout details. Here is what the quilt center looks like. This gives you a little bit of an up close bird's eye view of what we're talking about. So this is that big center, and here is the diagram, the electronic mock-up of how I pieced together this quilt. Now, I will have this available over on my blog in a PDF downloadable format. So exactly what you see here, you can print out and use for yourself, but I am going to go over it just a little bit so that you kind of understand how it all comes together. So we start with our quilt center. As I said, I used Barnstar 7 for my quilt center, and that is this portion here. It does not include this outer border. So this portion here, and a lot of squares and half square triangles, which gave me a chance to use some of the scraps that were left over from making my blocks. I started with a fat quarter bundle of both Blueberry Delight and Peachy Keen, but I don't think I used all of the fabrics from Blueberry Delight, and I know I didn't use all of the fabrics from Peachy Keen. So I just pared it down and chose the fabrics that worked the nicest together. So I don't remember how many fat quarters I started with total. I'll have to look that up over on my blog because I did share my initial fabric pull of the fabrics that I chose from the two bundles. So I can look up and see exactly how many I started with. And so when I was piecing this center, as well as I was adding in my sashing strips, I was using scraps as much as I could. I did have to add just a little bit of yardage, but for the most part, I was piecing from what I had left over. So for this quilt center, you need this measurement, including the border, to equal 36.5 inches square. I have that noted here. My Barnstar 7 center is a 32-inch finished. So with the border added here comes to 36-inch finished. That means that you could use anything for this center portion all the way up to and including these borders if it measures 36 inches total. So if you wanted to do something like what I have here with the 32-inch center, you would just add borders to bring it to 36. If you had a big one block, that measures 36, you could use that. Remember, that's 36 inches finished, so you're looking at 36.5 inches unfinished. So this gives you a lot of room to play with what you want to do with your quilt center. A 36-inch finished is a pretty common size for a block to be. It's also an easy size to enlarge a 12-inch block from, because we go 12, 24, 36. So the grid for that block is going to be the same, which makes it a really easy size to enlarge from 12 inches, but just play around to your heart's content to get to your 36 inches finished. Now, if you wanted to do exactly like what I'm doing, this is Barnstar 7 with no borders, plus this border here, which I have noted on my layout. So these measurements are your cut measurements. So when you are looking at this layout, if you print this out, it shows you exactly the measurements that these need to measure cut. So they'll be a little bit smaller than that once they're sewn in. Okay, so that takes care of your center portion. I've also included what I said about the 32 versus 36 right there, so you can refer to that. And if you have questions, I am not going to be giving piecing instructions for this quilt layout, but I am giving you all of these measurements. So if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Or if it's something that needs a little bit more time to answer, you can also feel free to email me. I will put my email address down below in that description box as well. So if you have questions, I can help you out there as well. So once you have your center finished, then we move on to our small blocks. So these are all the 6.5-inch unfinished or 6-inch finished Moda Blockheads blocks. If you're new to Moda Blockheads, you will find all of these patterns over on the Moda Blockheads Round 5 archive. I will link to that below. I know some of you are probably very new to Moda Blockheads and have no idea where these blocks came from, so I will link to some valuable information if you are new to this sew along, so that you know where to find these blocks if you want to make them for yourself. So this next border here consists of our 6-inch finished Moda Blockheads blocks. I did all of mine with white backgrounds, and then I added in scrappy sashing in between the blocks, and the corners are half square triangles. So you can see here, or when you print it out for yourself, these strips are cut at 2 inches by 6.5, all of those. And then for your half square triangle corners, these smaller half square triangles, you cut your 2 squares at 7 inches, and you are going to be trimming these half square triangles to 6.5 inches square to fit in these corners. And then we move on to this next border here. You're going to see that for these borders, you need 2 3/4 by 48.5 for your sides, and then across the top, it's 2 3/4 by 53. Don't be alarmed by that measurements. Oftentimes we see these being, like 53.5, 54.5 with that half-inch measurement. The 53 is actually accurate. So it is a 2 3/4 by 53-inch cut measurement. And then we move out here to our outer border, and we are basically repeating kind of what we did, only we're using our 12-inch blocks. For these, I did all blue backgrounds so that I could kind of frame everything out. These are the 12-inch finished. The sashing here is cut at 2 inches by 12.5. So all of these rectangles here that you see are the 2 by 12.5. And then the same for the smaller blocks. The little rectangles are all going to be that 2-inch by 6.5-inch measurement. These big half square triangles, these are cut from 13-inch squares, so you need a 13-inch of your light fabric and a 13-inch of your dark fabric. I did happen to have what I needed from my fat quarters of the darker fabric, but I did have to pull some extra yardage for these corners because I no longer had those big 13-inch squares that I needed. So I did have to cut from additional yardage for these. And then the other spot where I had to cut from yardage was this right here for this border, and then also for my half square triangles here. I didn't have enough of what I needed right here. But other than that, oh, and this one here, this border too, I also cut from yardage. So some of those borders I did need yardage, and then I had to fill in with that white on white for those very outside corners because I just didn't have enough from my fat quarters that were left over. It does use up quite a bit of those scrappy bits, which was really nice. I always enjoy doing some scrap busting. So that is kind of a really quick overview of the measurements that you would need to use this layout. As I said, I'm going to put this over on my blog so that you can print this out if you want to see this a little bit better. And if you have questions, feel free to let me know. I will do my very best to help you out with those. Let me know what you thought about this round of Moda Blockheads. This is the 5th round, so I've participated in every round so far. This quilt is quite a bit different from my first 4. I will link to the video where I showed my first 4 Moda Blockheads quilts. They were all, well, they weren't all scrappy, I guess. The first 3 I think were scrappy, and then I did one that was more cozy up, more for fall. And now this one I used, well, you can tell just this fun palette of blues and corals and peaches, which completely different from any of my previous quilts. And it was a fun one to finish. So I think that wraps everything up for this video today. I'm always happy to wrap up Moda Blockheads, and I bet you are happy to be finishing up too. It's fun to have a completed quilt. And this one was kind of a long-term project. We've been working on it for over a year. Thanks so much for stopping by, and I will catch you again next time.